Pay attention to this footage. What you're looking at right now is an image captured by Marcus Rivera in his home studio. Watch the woman in the frame. Really look at her eyes. See how they're tracking something just off camera? Notice the slight tension in her jaw? The way her fingers are pressed against her sides? This isn't a willing subject posing for art. This is someone sending a silent scream for help. In the next 2 hours, you're going to hear how this single piece of footage became the key to unlocking one of the most disturbing cases of captivity and psychological torture ever documented in Austin, Texas. Because what looks like experimental photography on the surface was actually evidence of a crime happening in real time. You know that moment when you see something that just feels wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on why? Like when you're scrolling through social media and something makes you pause, makes you look twice. For Rebecca Torres, that moment came on a humid evening in July 2004, and it would haunt her for months. Rebecca was sitting in her small apartment in downtown Austin, clicking through her brother's photography website. Marcus had always been the artistic one in the family. Moody, intense, the kind of guy who'd spend hours in his darkroom talking about light and shadow and the human condition. She'd learned to just smile and nod when he went on his creative rants. But this night was different. The image on her screen stopped her cold. It was labeled Decay, a Digital Study, and it showed a woman, Marcus's wife, Elena, looking absolutely destroyed. Not Photoshop destroyed. Actually, physically deteriorated in a way that made Rebecca's stomach turn. The skin looked damaged, mottled, like someone had been slowly poisoned or burned. But it was the eyes that got her. Those eyes were alive, aware, terrified. Marcus and Elena had been married for 3 years. They'd met at an art gallery opening in 2001, one of those whirlwind romance situations where they were engaged within 6 months and married 6 months after that. Elena Rivera was beautiful. Everyone said so. She had this thick, dark hair she wore in elaborate styles that took forever to perfect. She was a freelance makeup artist, and she understood Marcus's artistic vision, or at least that's what he always said. They seemed happy enough, if a little isolated. But Rebecca hadn't actually seen Elena in person since early May. It was now mid-July. Every time she called, Marcus had an excuse. Elena was working on a big project. She was visiting her sick mother in San Antonio. She was dealing with a skin condition and didn't want visitors. The excuses were always smooth, always reasonable, always delivered in Marcus's calm, measured voice. Looking at that photograph, Rebecca felt something shift in her chest. Something was very, very wrong. The thing about family is that you know when someone's lying to you. You might not be able to prove it, might not even be able to explain it, but you feel it in your bones. Rebecca stared at that image for 20 minutes straight, zooming in, studying every pixel, every detail. This wasn't art. This was documentation. She picked up her phone and called her younger sister, Carmen. "When's the last time you talked to Elena?" Rebecca asked, skipping the pleasantries. Carmen went quiet for a second. I don't know. Maybe Mother's Day? Why? You need to see something." 15 minutes later, Carmen was at Rebecca's apartment, staring at the same image on the computer screen. Her reaction was immediate and visceral. "Oh my God! What the hell happened to her?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," Rebecca said. "Marcus says it's digital manipulation, commentary on beauty standards, or some pretentious garbage like that." But Carmen was already shaking her head. "Becky, look at her hands. Look at the way the light hits her skin. That's not Photoshop. That's real damage." They spent the next hour going through Marcus's entire portfolio. He'd been uploading new work every week for the past 2 months, and it was all disturbing. Images of decay, of deterioration, of what he called the beauty of entropy. Some were clearly digital art, warped, distorted, obviously manipulated, but the ones featuring Elena, those looked different. Too real, too specific. "We need to go over there," Carmen said finally. "And say what? Hey Marcus, we think you're doing something terrible to your wife based on some creepy photos." He'll just explain it away. "So what do we do?" Rebecca thought about it. She thought about Marcus's obsessive personality, his need for control, the way he'd slowly isolated Elena from her friends and family over the past year. She thought about how Elena had stopped posting on social media, stopped answering calls, just disappeared into Marcus's world. "We call someone who can actually do something about it," Rebecca said, reaching for her phone. The Austin Police Department didn't exactly rush to help. The dispatcher was polite but skeptical. No, Elena hadn't been reported missing. No, there was no evidence of a crime. Just some disturbing artwork and a concerned sister-in-law who had a bad feeling. They took Rebecca's information and said they'd do a welfare check, but she could hear the doubt in the officer's voice. 3 days went by. Nothing happened. Rebecca called the police department twice, left messages, got nowhere. She tried calling Elena's cell phone, straight to voicemail. She drove by Marcus and Elena's house, a modest craftsman-style home in the Hyde Park neighborhood, but didn't have the courage to knock on the door. What would she even say? On the 4th day, Rebecca got a call from Officer Jennifer Mills, one of the patrol officers who'd done the welfare check. "Ms. Torres, I wanted to follow up with you about your concerns regarding your sister-in-law," Officer Mills said, her voice carefully neutral. Rebecca's heart started pounding. "What did you find?" "I spoke with both Mr. and Mrs. Rivera yesterday afternoon. Mrs. Rivera answered the door, confirmed her identity, and stated that she was fine. She explained that she's been dealing with a severe skin condition, some kind of allergic reaction to a new product line she was testing for work. That's why she hasn't been social lately. She seemed coherent, aware, and showed no signs of distress." Rebecca felt the air go out of her lungs. "You actually saw her! You saw Elena!" "Yes, ma'am. I understand your concern, but there's no indication of foul play here. Mrs. Rivera is an adult woman who confirmed she's staying in her home of her own free will." "Did you see her skin? Did you see what she looked like?" Officer Mills hesitated. "I did notice that she appeared to have some kind of dermatological issue, yes. But she explained it, and her explanation was consistent with what you described seeing in the photographs. I'm sorry, Ms. Torres, but without evidence of a crime or Mrs. Rivera requesting help, there's nothing more we can do." After she hung up, Rebecca sat in silence for a long time. Had she been wrong? Was this all in her head? Maybe Elena really did have some terrible skin reaction. Maybe Marcus's art was just art, however disturbing. But then she thought about Elena's eyes in that photograph, the way they'd been tracking something off camera, the tension in her body, the silent scream. No, something was wrong. She knew it. Rebecca decided to do what any desperate person does in the digital age. She started digging online. She created a fake email account and sent a message to the address listed on Marcus's photography website, pretending to be an art collector interested in his Decay series. She wanted to know more about his process, his inspiration, his techniques. Marcus responded within hours. His email was long, rambling, filled with the kind of pretentious art speak that made Rebecca's eyes glaze over. But buried in all that nonsense was something that made her blood run cold. The subject must be willing to commit fully to the transformation. This isn't mere photography. It's a documentation of genuine metamorphosis, of beauty surrendering to entropy in real time. Real time. Not Photoshop, not digital manipulation. Real-time deterioration. Rebecca forwarded the email to Officer Mills with a note. "Please read this and tell me I'm being paranoid." Officer Mills didn't respond. Meanwhile, Marcus continued uploading new images to his website. Once a week, like clockwork, a new photograph would appear in the Decay series. And with each new image, Elena looked worse. Her skin was more damaged, her eyes more hollow, her body more frail. Marcus's descriptions became more elaborate, more disturbing. He talked about the purity of suffering and the transcendent nature of physical decline. Carmen started having nightmares. She'd call Rebecca at 2 a.m, crying, saying she couldn't get Elena's face out of her head. Their mother, Maria, thought they were overreacting. "Marcus is strange, yes, but he's not a monster," she'd say. "And the police checked on Elena. She's fine." But fine people don't look like that. Fine people don't disappear from their own lives. Rebecca started keeping a log. Every photo, every upload, every detail. She documented the progressive deterioration in Elena's appearance, noting dates and comparing the images side by side. The pattern was undeniable. This was systematic, methodical, intentional. Whatever was happening to Elena wasn't an accident or a skin condition. It was being done to her. On August 12, 2004, Rebecca received an email. The sender was listed as ER, Elena Rivera. The subject line was blank, and the message itself contained only a single line of text. Library, downtown, Computer 7, 3 p.m. today. Rebecca's hands were shaking so badly she could barely type a response. But the email bounced back. The account had been deactivated or never existed in the first place. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed her car keys and drove straight to the downtown Austin Public Library, arriving 20 minutes early. She positioned herself where she could see Computer 7, her heart hammering in her chest, wondering if this was real or if she'd finally cracked under the pressure of her own suspicions. At exactly 3 p.m., nothing happened. 3:05, 3:10. Rebecca was about to leave, convinced she'd been pranked or had imagined the whole thing, when a man sat down at Computer 7. Not Elena, just some random guy checking his email. Rebecca felt like crying. She was losing it. This whole thing had driven her crazy. She stood up to leave, and that's when she noticed the piece of paper tucked under the keyboard at Computer 7. The man hadn't seen it. No one had seen it except her. She walked over casually, pretending to browse the nearby shelves, and managed to grab the paper without anyone noticing. In the bathroom, she unfolded it with trembling hands. The note was in Elena's handwriting. Rebecca recognized it from birthday cards and thank you notes. It was short and terrifying. He watches everything. I can't call, I can't leave, basement, soundproof, chemicals, burns. He takes pictures, posts them as art. Please help me. He'll kill me soon. When he's done with his series, coordinates below, send police, don't come yourself, he's dangerous. Below the message was a string of numbers, GPS coordinates. Rebecca's vision blurred. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the paper. Elena was alive, she was being held captive, and Marcus, her own brother, was torturing her, documenting it, and displaying it as art for the whole world to see. She didn't go home. She drove straight to the police station and demanded to see someone from the detective division. She showed them the note, explained everything, begged them to act immediately. The desk sergeant looked at her like she was insane, but he called upstairs anyway. Detective Ryan Kowalski came down 15 minutes later. He was in his mid-40s, built like someone who'd played football in college and still hit the gym regularly. He listened to Rebecca's story with an expression that was hard to read, somewhere between skeptical and concerned. You're telling me that your brother is holding his wife captive in their basement, poisoning her with chemicals, and documenting her deterioration as an art project, he said slowly, like he was trying to make sense of an impossible equation. Yes. And she managed to send you this note from a public library? Yes. How did she get to the library if she's being held captive? Rebecca hadn't thought of that. I don't know. Maybe he took her out briefly. Maybe she escaped for a few minutes? Does it matter? We need to check those coordinates. Detective Kowalski studied the note for a long moment. Then he looked at Rebecca with something that might have been pity. Ms. Torres, I understand you're concerned about your sister-in-law, but this situation is complicated. We already did a welfare check. Officer Mills spoke directly with Mrs. Rivera, who stated she was fine and staying in her home voluntarily. He forced her to say that, or she was too scared to tell the truth with him standing right there. That's possible, Kowalski admitted. But we need more than an anonymous note to get a search warrant. We need probable cause. We need evidence that a crime is being committed. The photographs, they're evidence. They're art, Ms. Torres. Disturbing art, yes, but not illegal. People post all kinds of extreme content online. That doesn't mean a crime has occurred. Rebecca felt like screaming. So you're just going to do nothing? You're going to let him keep torturing her? Detective Kowalski sighed. I'm going to run these coordinates and see what they correspond to. If they match your brother's address, that corroborates your story to some degree. I'll also look into Mr. Rivera's background, see if there's anything there. But I need you to understand, We can't just kick down someone's door based on speculation. How much evidence do you need? How bad does it have to get before you'll help her? He didn't have an answer for that. Rebecca left the police station feeling helpless and furious. She called Carmen, told her everything, and they both agreed on one thing. If the police wouldn't act immediately, they needed to do something themselves, not break into Marcus's house. That would be stupid and illegal, but they could watch it, monitor it, document any strange activity. For the next week, Rebecca and Carmen took turns parking down the street from Marcus's house, watching for, they weren't even sure what, signs of Elena, evidence of something wrong, anything that would convince the police to take action. They saw Marcus leave every morning around 10 a.m., always returning within an hour with groceries or supplies. He'd carry the bags inside quickly, glancing around like he was checking to see if anyone was watching. The windows were covered with heavy curtains. No lights came on after dark except in what they assumed was Marcus's photography studio on the second floor. On the 8th day of their surveillance, something changed. Marcus left the house at his usual time but didn't come back after an hour. 2 hours passed. 3. Carmen called Rebecca in a panic. "Something's wrong. He's never gone this long. What if he's in there doing something to her right now?" "He's not in the house, Carmen. We watched him leave." "What if there's someone else? What if he has an accomplice?" Rebecca hadn't thought of that. "I'm calling Kowalski." But Detective Kowalski wasn't at his desk. She left an urgent message and then made a decision that she'd spend the rest of her life questioning. She drove to Marcus's house, walked up to the front door and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. She tried the doorbell. Silence. Against every instinct of self-preservation, Rebecca walked around to the back of the house. The back door was locked, but there was a basement window that was slightly open, just a crack, maybe for ventilation. She knelt down and called out, "Elena, Elena, are you down there?" For a long moment, nothing. Then, faintly, so faintly she almost thought she'd imagined it. "Help!" Rebecca's blood turned to ice. "Elena, I'm here! I'm going to get help! Hurry!" came the whispered response. "He's getting worse! Running out of time!" Rebecca pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "I need police and ambulance at 2847 Pecos Street immediately. I have reason to believe someone is being held captive in the basement. This is an emergency." The dispatcher asked a dozen questions, but Rebecca just kept repeating the address and the word emergency until she heard sirens in the distance. When the police arrived, Detective Kowalski was with them. He looked at Rebecca with an expression she couldn't quite read. Anger mixed with something else. Maybe respect. Maybe frustration. "You couldn't wait for us to handle this properly?" he said. "I heard her, Detective. She's down there. She asked for help." Kowalski nodded slowly. Then he turned to the other officers. "We've got exigent circumstances based on the report of someone in distress. We're going in." It took them less than 3 minutes to breach the front door. Rebecca watched from the street, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might explode. Carmen arrived just as the officers disappeared into the house, and the two sisters stood there, holding hands, praying they weren't too late. 7 minutes later, paramedics rushed into the house with a gurney. 9 minutes after that, they came back out. The woman on the stretcher didn't look like Elena Rivera. She looked like something from a horror movie. Her skin was covered in chemical burns and lesions, her hair was falling out in patches, and her body was so emaciated that Rebecca could see every bone. But her eyes, those eyes that had haunted Rebecca for weeks, were open and aware and filled with tears. Elena reached out a trembling hand as the gurney passed. Rebecca grabbed it, and Elena's fingers closed around hers with surprising strength. "You found me?" Elena whispered. "You believed me." "I'm so sorry it took so long," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry." Then the paramedics were loading Elena into the ambulance, and she was gone, sirens wailing as they rushed her to Del Seaton Medical Center. Detective Kowalski came out of the house looking pale and shaken. He'd been a cop for 18 years, had seen things that would give most people nightmares, but whatever he'd found in that basement had clearly gotten to him. "Your brother isn't here," he said to Rebecca, "but you need to see what's downstairs." Rebecca hesitated. Did she really want to know? Did she want those images in her head for the rest of her life? "You need to understand what we're dealing with," Kowalski said quietly, "because this is bigger than you think." The basement was exactly what Elena had described, soundproofed walls, covered in acoustic foam panels. But what made Rebecca's stomach turn was the setup in the center of the room. A chair, bolted to the floor, with restraints on the arms and legs. Next to it, a table covered in bottles and containers, cleaning chemicals, industrial solvents, acids, and cameras. So many cameras, positioned at different angles, all pointing at that chair. On one wall, Marcus had printed and mounted dozens of photographs, a timeline of Elena's deterioration, day by day, week by week. Underneath each photo, he'd written notes in his neat, precise handwriting. Day 47, introduction of hydrochloric acid solution, 2% concentration, subject showing expected dermal response. Day 68, increased exposure time to 15 minutes, subject's pain tolerance improving. Day 91, began documentation of psychological breakdown alongside physical deterioration. This wasn't art. This was a methodical torture experiment, documented like a science project. "He's been doing this since May," Kowalski said quietly. "We found journals upstairs. He planned the whole thing. Called it the Metamorphosis Project. He wanted to document the complete physical and psychological destruction of a human being and present it as high art." Rebecca couldn't speak. This was her brother, the boy she'd grown up with, who'd gotten into fights defending her on the playground, who'd taught her how to ride a bike. When had he become this monster? "We've issued a warrant for his arrest," Kowalski continued. "We've got units checking his usual locations, and we've alerted the Border Patrol in case he tries to leave the state. He can't have gone far. His car is still parked 2 blocks from here." "Where is he?" Rebecca managed to ask. "That's what we're trying to figure out." While police searched for Marcus, Elena was fighting for her life at Dell Seton Medical Center. The doctors were stunned by the extent of her injuries. She'd been systematically exposed to a cocktail of industrial chemicals that had caused severe burns across 40% of her body. She was malnourished, dehydrated, and showing signs of kidney damage from the toxic exposure. The fact that she was still alive was, according to her lead physician, Dr. Sarah Thornton, nothing short of miraculous. Most people wouldn't have survived this level of sustained chemical exposure, Dr. Thornton told the detectives during their first interview with Elena. The fact that she's conscious and able to communicate is extraordinary. Elena's testimony, given from her hospital bed with Rebecca holding her hand, painted a picture of calculated, methodical horror. Marcus had started small, she explained, just some rough treatment during arguments, pushing, grabbing, nothing she thought was serious enough to leave over. Then it escalated. He became controlling about her appearance, her friends, her work. He convinced her to quit her makeup artist job and work from home. He slowly cut her off from everyone she knew. In May 2004, he'd shown her what he called his masterpiece plan. He wanted to create the ultimate art project, a real-time documentation of human deterioration. He promised he wouldn't really hurt her, that it would just be some makeup effects and Photoshop. She'd laughed it off as another one of his weird, artistic phases. That night, he drugged her coffee. When she woke up, she was strapped to the chair in the basement. "He told me this was going to be his legacy," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That people would talk about his work for generations, that I should be honored to be part of something so revolutionary." "How long did he keep you down there?" Detective Kowalski asked gently. "I lost track of days, weeks, months. He'd let me up sometimes to use the bathroom, to eat a little. Always watched, always controlled. The chemicals, he started with diluted solutions. Said he was building up to the real art. Every session got worse, longer, more painful. The photographs he posted online, those were taken during these sessions?" Elena nodded, tears rolling down her damaged cheeks. "He was so proud of them. He'd show me the comments from his website, people calling them hauntingly beautiful and provocative. Nobody knew they were watching me die in real time. How did you get the message to your sister? For the first time, a ghost of a smile crossed Elena's ravaged face. Marcus isn't as smart as he thinks. He got cocky, started bringing his laptop down to show me the reactions to his latest posts. One day, he left it open while he went upstairs to answer the door. I had maybe 90 seconds. I sent the email to Rebecca. I'd memorized her address months ago, planning for any chance to contact her. Then I created the throwaway account and left the note at the library the next day when he took me out for what he called a field test. A field test? He wanted to see if I could pass as a willing participant if police came asking. He coached me on what to say, how to act, threatened to do worse if I didn't perform perfectly. Detective Kowalski exchanged glances with his partner, Detective Lisa Chen, who'd been quietly taking notes throughout the interview. When Officer Mills did the welfare check, that was the test? Yes, I tried so hard to signal something was wrong. I positioned myself so she could see my arms, the burns. But Marcus stood right behind her the whole time. His hand was on the gun in his waistband. I knew if I said anything, he'd kill her and then kill me. The FBI's cybercrimes unit got involved once they understood the full scope of Marcus's online activity. Special Agent David Park and his team seized all of Marcus's computers, his website, his cloud storage accounts. What they found was even more disturbing than the physical crime scene. Marcus had been running what he called an artistic journal on several dark web forums, posting detailed descriptions of his methods, his techniques, his philosophy. He'd been communicating with other people who shared his twisted interests, people who encouraged him, who asked for more extreme content, who treated Elena's torture as entertainment. We're looking at potential conspiracy charges, Agent Park told Detective Kowalski. Some of these forum members weren't just passive observers. They were actively coaching Rivera, suggesting new methods, even offering to send him specialized chemicals. Are we talking about a network? Potentially. We've identified at least 6 other individuals in the U.S. who may be engaged in similar activities. This is bigger than one sick guy in Austin. While the FBI worked on the digital investigation, the manhunt for Marcus Rivera intensified. Tips came in from all over Texas. He'd been spotted in San Antonio, in Houston, in Dallas. None of them panned out. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. On the 5th day after Elena's rescue, Rebecca received a phone call that made her blood run cold. The caller ID showed Marcus's cell phone number. "Don't hang up," Marcus said calmly when she answered. "I just want to talk." "Where are you?" Rebecca demanded, her hands shaking. "Doesn't matter. I'll be gone soon. But I wanted you to understand something first. What I was doing, it wasn't evil. It was art. True art requires sacrifice. Elena understood that. Deep down, she knew she was part of something important. You tortured her. You poisoned her. She almost died. She was always going to die eventually. Everyone does. I was just documenting the process, making it mean something, making it beautiful. There's nothing beautiful about what you did." Marcus laughed, that familiar sound that used to comfort her when they were kids but now made her skin crawl. "You don't understand art, Becky. You never did. Neither do the police or the FBI or anyone else who's looking at my work and seeing only horror. They can't see the transcendent nature of decay, the poetry in deterioration. You're insane. I'm an artist. There's a difference, and my work will outlive all of us. People will study it, analyze it, try to understand it. I'll be remembered long after you and Elena and everyone else is forgotten." Rebecca was trying to keep him talking, knowing the police were probably tracing the call. "Marcus, please, turn yourself in. Get help. This doesn't have to end badly." "It already ended, Becky. The moment you found her, my masterpiece was ruined. The series was supposed to culminate in the final transformation. Death itself, captured in perfect detail. But you took that from me. You destroyed my life's work. I saved Elena's life. You interrupted art in progress, but it doesn't matter now. I've made peace with it. This conversation is my last piece, the artist's statement before the final curtain. Marcus, what are you—" The line went dead. Rebecca immediately called Detective Kowalski and told him everything. Within minutes, they had a location from the cell tower ping. Marcus had been calling from Zilker Park, near the Barton Springs pool. Police descended on the park within 8 minutes. They found Marcus sitting on a bench overlooking the water, his camera in his lap, completely calm. He didn't resist arrest. He simply stood up, put his hands behind his back, and smiled. "Did you get the shot?" he asked the officer who was cuffing him, nodding toward the camera. "What shot?" "The sunset. I was photographing the sunset. Last one I'll ever see as a free man. I wanted to remember it." Marcus Rivera's arrest made national headlines. The torture artist, they called him, the man who posted his crimes as art. Every major news outlet covered the story, dissecting his photographs, his journals, his online presence. Psychologists debated his mental state. Art critics debated whether his work could be separated from his crimes. And victims' advocates rallied around Elena, who was still fighting for her life in the hospital. The prosecution's case was led by Assistant District Attorney Michelle Park, a veteran prosecutor known for her meticulous preparation and courtroom presence. She knew this case was going to be complicated. Defense attorneys would argue about Marcus's mental state, about the definition of consent, about whether what he did could truly be called torture if Elena had at some point in their relationship agreed to participate in his art projects. But ADA Park had something most prosecutors only dream of: overwhelming evidence. Not just the physical crime scene, not just Elena's testimony, but Marcus's own documentation of his crimes. He'd kept detailed journals, dated photographs, even video footage of some of the torture sessions. And then there was the video that changed everything. During the search of Marcus's house, forensic technicians had found dozens of external hard drives hidden in various locations. One of them, buried in a locked box in the attic, contained video files that Marcus had apparently been saving for what he called the eventual documentary about my work. The video that made everyone in the DA's office go silent was dated June 23rd, Divituk Stoshi Chetri. It showed Elena strapped to the chair in the basement. Marcus's face was visible as he prepared his chemicals, explaining to the camera what he was about to do, why he was doing it, how it would look in the final photographs. Then the camera switched to a wide shot, and there was Elena, fully conscious, shaking her head, pleading, "Please, Marcus, not today. Please, I can't take any more. Please." "The art requires commitment, Elena. You knew this when we started." "I never agreed to this. You drugged me. You kidnapped me." Marcus's response was chilling in its calm delivery. "You married me. You agreed to be my muse. This is what that means. Now stop complaining and try to stay still. The composition works better when you're not moving so much." The video continued for 43 minutes. Every second of it was usable in court. Every second of it proved that Elena was not a willing participant, that Marcus knew exactly what he was doing, and that he felt no remorse whatsoever. But the prosecution's strongest piece of evidence came from Marcus himself, from the footage he'd shot in his home studio, the same footage that had first raised Rebecca's suspicions. Detective Kowalski and his team had seized all of Marcus's camera equipment during the search, including the video camera he'd used to record his artistic process. The footage that became central to the case was found on a memory card in that same camera. It showed Elena in the exact pose from the photographs Marcus had posted online, the ones Rebecca had first seen on his website. But this wasn't a static photograph. It was video, and in that video, you could see everything Rebecca had intuitively understood when she first looked at those images. Elena's eyes tracking something off camera. Marcus moving around, adjusting lights, checking angles. The tension in her jaw. She was gritting her teeth against pain. The way her fingers pressed against her sides, trying to keep herself still, despite trembling from the chemical burns. And if you listened carefully with headphones, which the forensic audio team did, you could hear Elena whispering over and over again, "Please stop! Please stop! Please stop!" This was the footage they showed to the jury. This was the moment when speculation became certainty, when disturbing art became documented torture, when Marcus Rivera's carefully constructed narrative about consensual artistic collaboration collapsed completely. The FBI's investigation into Marcus's dark web activities yielded even more evidence. They'd traced his online persona back 5 years to forums where he'd discussed his fantasies about creating art through suffering. They found conversations where he'd specifically planned to use his wife as his subject. They found posts where he'd solicited advice on how to keep someone captive for extended periods, how to inflict pain without causing immediate death, how to document it all in a way that looked artistic rather than criminal. Special Agent Park testified at trial about the network of individuals Marcus had been communicating with, people who called themselves aestheticians of agony and who believed that true art could only be created through genuine suffering. The FBI had already arrested 3 other individuals based on evidence from Marcus's communications, and investigations were ongoing. Elena's recovery was slow and painful. She underwent 12 surgeries in the first 6 months after her rescue, including multiple skin grafts, reconstructive procedures, and treatments for the organ damage caused by chemical exposure. The physical scars would never fully heal, but Dr. Thornton was cautiously optimistic that Elena would survive. The psychological scars were harder to measure. Elena worked with a trauma therapist 3 times a week, processing not just the physical torture, but the betrayal, the isolation, the months of believing she would die alone in that basement while the world looked at photographs of her suffering and called them beautiful. Rebecca quit her job to be with Elena during her recovery. She and Carmen took turns staying at the hospital, reading to her, talking to her, reminding her that she wasn't alone anymore. Maria, their mother, finally understood the gravity of what her son had done and threw herself into helping Elena heal, bringing homemade meals, sitting with her during the worst moments. Marcus's trial began in February 2005. The courthouse was packed every single day with journalists, true crime enthusiasts, and people who'd seen Marcus's photographs online and couldn't believe they'd been looking at real torture. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The defense tried everything: diminished capacity, artistic expression protected by the First Amendment, claims that Elena had initially consented to be part of an extreme art project. Nothing worked. A.D.A. Park systematically dismantled every defense argument. She presented the video evidence, the journals, the testimony from medical experts about the severity of Elena's injuries. She brought in forensic psychologists who explained that this wasn't mental illness. This was calculated sadism disguised as art. She presented Elena herself, still recovering, still bearing the visible scars of what Marcus had done, telling her story in a voice that shook but never broke. The most powerful moment came when A.D.A. Park presented the footage from Marcus's studio camera, the same footage that had first appeared in the pre-intro of this documentary. She played it for the jury without narration, just letting them watch Elena's eyes tracking Marcus's movements, seeing the pain she was trying to hide, hearing the whispered pleas that Marcus had either ignored or not noticed while he adjusted his lighting and framed his shots. "This is not art," Ada Park said quietly after the video ended. "This is evidence. Evidence of kidnapping, of torture, of conspiracy to commit murder. The defendant wanted you to see beauty in suffering. I'm asking you to see the truth instead." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Marcus showed no emotion when the verdict was read. He simply nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. But when the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, he stood up and delivered a 10-minute monologue about artistic integrity, about society's failure to understand revolutionary art, about how future generations would vindicate his work. He never once mentioned Elena. He never once expressed remorse. The judge cut him off halfway through. "Mr. Rivera, you will have plenty of time to work on your artistic statement where you're going. This court is not interested in your manifesto." Elena Rivera stood on the steps of the Travis County Courthouse on a warm afternoon in April 2005, flanked by Rebecca and Carmen. She'd asked to make a statement to the press, and now dozens of cameras were pointed at her, waiting to capture her words. She looked different from the woman in Marcus's photographs. The scars were still visible, they always would be, but there was strength in her eyes now. a kind of fierce determination that hadn't been there before. "My name is Elena Rivera," she began, her voice steady. "For 4 months, I was held captive and tortured by someone who claimed to love me, someone who called what he did to me art. I want to make something very clear. What happened to me was not art. It was not creative expression. It was not a philosophical statement about beauty or suffering. It was a crime. It was torture, and it was wrong." She paused, gathering herself. "I survived because my sister-in-law refused to look away. Rebecca saw something wrong in those photographs, and she didn't stop until she found me. She didn't let anyone convince her that she was overreacting or being paranoid. She trusted her instincts, and it saved my life." Elena looked directly into the cameras. "If you see something that doesn't feel right, if someone you care about disappears from their own life, if you notice signs of abuse or control, if something just feels wrong, please don't ignore it. Trust yourself. Speak up. It might save someone's life." The press conference lasted 20 minutes, and Elena answered every question with the same quiet strength. Yes, she was still recovering. Yes, she was working with therapists. Yes, she was planning to sue Marcus and everyone who'd encouraged his crimes online. And yes, she was going to testify in the federal cases against the other members of Marcus's network. Marcus Rivera was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on multiple charges. Let me break down what he was convicted of. Aggravated kidnapping, 1 count. Aggravated assault with serious bodily injury, 17 counts, 1 for each documented torture session. Unlawful restraint, 1 count. Conspiracy to commit murder, 1 count. Production and distribution of obscene material, 43 counts, 1 for each photograph posted online. The judge sentenced him to consecutive terms on the most serious charges, meaning Marcus would serve a minimum of 217 years if parole had been an option, which it wasn't. The federal charges came later. The FBI's investigation into Marcus's online network resulted in 14 additional arrests across the United States. Marcus was charged with conspiracy, wire fraud, for selling access to his exclusive content, and violation of federal anti-torture statutes. Those convictions added another 60 years to his sentence. Elena became an advocate for domestic violence victims, particularly those whose abuse involved digital documentation or online exposure. She partnered with several organizations to create educational programs about the warning signs of controlling relationships, the dangers of isolation, and the importance of trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. She also worked with the FBI to help identify other victims in the cases against Marcus's online associates. Her testimony was crucial in securing convictions against 3 other individuals who'd been running similar projects with their own unwilling subjects. Rebecca quit her original job permanently and became Elena's full-time advocate and assistant. Together, they traveled to conferences, spoke at universities, trained law enforcement officers on the intersection of domestic violence and digital crime. Their relationship, forged in the horror of those months in 2004, became a powerful example of family loyalty and the importance of not looking away from uncomfortable truths. In 2007, Elena published a memoir titled Behind the Lens: Surviving Art's Darkest Vision. It became a bestseller and was later adapted into a documentary film. All proceeds went to organizations supporting domestic violence survivors and funding trauma recovery programs. As for Marcus's photographs, the evidence of his crimes, they were sealed by court order. Some people argued they should be preserved as a warning about the dangers of confusing cruelty with creativity. Others insisted they should be destroyed, that allowing them to exist in any form was a continued violation of Elena's dignity. The court sided with Elena. In 2006, every photograph, every video, every piece of Marcus's art was destroyed under supervised conditions. Elena insisted on being present for the destruction. He wanted his work to outlive him, she said, watching the files being permanently deleted from seized hard drives. He wanted to be remembered, but the only thing people will remember about Marcus Rivera is that he was a monster who hurt someone who trusted him. That's his legacy. Not art, just cruelty. Marcus is currently incarcerated at the Federal Correctional Institution in Beaumont, Texas. He's filed multiple appeals, all of which have been denied. He still maintains that he was creating revolutionary art, that future generations will understand his vision. Nobody's listening. Elena lives in Colorado now, far from the house where she was held captive, far from the memories that haunted her in Austin. She's rebuilt her life piece by piece, day by day. The scars will never fully fade. Not the physical ones, not the emotional ones, but she's alive. She's strong. And she's made it her mission to ensure that what happened to her never happens to anyone else. In memory of all those who've suffered in silence, whose pain was witnessed but not seen, whose cries for help were mistaken for art or ignored entirely, we remember, we believe, and we refuse to look away.